Hi, welcome to HiCode tutorial. This video is about relative positioning. Relative positioning is one of the most important parts of HiCode basics. In this video, I'll introduce to you first what relative positioning is, second, the widgets you'll meet in relative environment, and third, the features of these relative widgets. Also, we'll look at the wrap and prop properties which you'll be using throughout your design. First off, what is relative positioning? In relative positioning environment, elements are positioned on page one after another, in the order that they are added. They start from upper left and stack from top to bottom. This is similar to the normal flow in HTML if you are familiar with that. Let's go to the editor and see how it works. This time we're using this relative position. Click Create. When we create a new application and select relative positioning, the stage is by default in relative environment. If you want to use absolute positioning in some sub-areas, you can add a absolute banner or a absolute block. Let's get back to our relative environment. First, I'm going to add a page. And when I click on the text widget, text boxes automatically appear on my stage. Notice the difference from adding widgets in absolute environment. I had to draw on the stage to initialize a size and position for my new widget. Here I only need to select a parent and click Add. Not only do text boxes follow this rule, it is the same for every relative widget, like this input box or a row here. Now you've seen elements automatically positioning themselves from top to bottom, but how about from left to right? When I select this row, or I can select it in this widget tree, object tree, and add things to it, you can see widgets appearing from left to right. Now let's go on to the second part. What do we have in relative environment? First, since we've chosen relative position when creating this project, the stage itself is by default relative, and so is the page under the stage. And second, we have the rows and column widgets. Rows are horizontal and columns are vertical. I'm going to give this column a color. And this row blue. Yeah. So you can see here a row is horizontal and a column is vertical. Choose rows to hold your other elements when you want a horizontal layout, and when you want a vertical layout, choose column. You can see here. I won't be needing this, so I'm going to delete this. Next, we have this scroller, this one. A scroller is similar to a column, but with an effect like this. If you drag this down, and you can see this loading icon. So you'll use a scroller probably only when you need this loading effect. And next we also have relative banner. You can find it here in this. It has this percentage mark on it. We've known from previous videos that there are two banners, relative types and absolute banner. You can tell the difference from the color of the widget icons. Like this one has this blue icons. We also have this grid, tree, and JSON tree. They are specialized widgets which I'm not gonna get into today, but basically they are designed for displaying data. Next up, let's look at the features of relative widgets, or actually its properties. So first, wrap. You can find wrap here. It is like the feature of text editors, which allows the user's text to be continued to the next line when the side of the page is reached. We know that in a row, elements appear from left to right. The wrap property moves whatever element that exceeds the row's width to the next line. If I continue to add some text, you can see it appears on the second line. But if I turn this property off, the content overflow to the right side. Speaking of overflow, we can choose to let contents overflow or to have it cut. It is turned to visible by default. And if we give this row a width of 375 px, because this is the width of a regular iPhone, and add some other texts. Now that we added so many text boxes, the children's width have gone far beyond the parent's width. And now we take it to preview. It looked like this. But if we go back and turn on cut, hidden, everything longer will disappear. Because I want them back, I will use this scroll X property. Notice that we're having a scroll bar here. We've known that row is horizontal and x-axis is horizontal. That is why we turn on scroll X. And the result is like this. For computers, we can also hide the scroll bar. Scroll Y is usually used for columns. I'm going to make this column shorter to better see the effect and give it some text. Select scroll Y this time. And for computers, we can also turn off this scroll bar for perhaps aesthetic purposes. And now it looks like this. Note that scroll property will only be triggered when the sum of the children's height or width is larger than that of their parent. Nothing will happen even if the scroll is turned on. Now there are only two text boxes and I can't scroll it anymore. It's kind of stiff. Even if I turn the scroll property on, nothing will happen. Like if I delete this text, and I still have this scroll Y on, but because now I only have two text boxes, I can't scroll it anymore. Now let's look at alignments. Some of you might be having this question on your mind for a while, that why is everything starting from top left, why not in the middle? This is what alignment properties are responsible for. You can find vertical and horizontal alignments here, and you can explore them for yourself. And you can try it out for yourselves. What I want to emphasize today is this space between property. For columns, you can do vertical space between. And for rows, you can do horizontal space between, or justify, it's the same thing. A page is in its essence a column. So if I add two more rows in this page and click space between, all children of this page are evenly distributed. But notice that space between only affects the children, but not the grandchildren. They are still sticking together. And as in rows, when I have two sub-elements in a row and click horizontal justify or space between, they each stick to one end of the row. Nowadays we need designs that are very fluid. We need them to fit into different devices or sizes of screens, and in this case, space between is a very handy tool. This is a simple demo page that I've made with HiCode. When we look at the navigation bar, we have a bunch of input box and buttons on the right and some other things on the left. As I change the width of this page, those stars come closer together, but what is on the right always sticks to the right, and what is on the left always stays on the left. This is achieved with the space between option. Let's move on to conditional width. Conditional width is a special property for columns. You can see it right here. When I switch it on, it has these conditions. It means that I can specify a certain width for this column for each of these possible conditions. For example, when viewing this whole project on a large PC screen, I'm going to set this width of the column to 1200 pixels. And if I'm seeing it on a phone, if the full Windows width is smaller than this number, and the column will be 200 pixels. And I can set numbers for each of these scenarios. And we can see it in the preview. Right-click and go to Inspect of your browser. Right-click and go to the DevTool of your browser. As we drag this about and change the size of the window, we can see first the window size is on the upper right corner of the screen, and the red column is changing accordingly. We can click on this button and hover on the column to see its current width. In the bubble, we can see that it is now 600 in width, and if we make it to a phone size, it is now 200, and this is the effect of the conditional width. Conditional width is used for responsive designs. As in the previous example, as I change the Windows width, you can see the user interface change accordingly. Now, these elements are in 2 rows, and when I'm on a larger screen, they get into 1 row. Let's move on to part 2 of relative widget properties. In relative positioning environment, we can set the parameters of widgets in either percentage or pixels. The unit is changed by entering this percentage mark, as you can see here, and you can change it back by entering px as in pixels. I'm now going to use this text box as an example. Give it a background color and set this width to maybe 80%. And now you can see the unit changed to percentage. And this 80% means that the text box occupies 80% of its parent's width. When we go to preview, you can see that it's not changing. Alright, this is because I've previously set a fixed width for this parent box. I'm going to set it back to auto. Don't wrap around it. And now it changes with the Windows width, and whatever width it is, the text box is always 80% of its parent. You can also do the same thing to height, but I'm not going to repeat that here. And as for these properties, you can find them here. As we've just seen, the text box is changing with the window size, but maybe we'll want it to stop at some point, and we can set a maximum width of 800 pixels, for example. And now when the width is smaller than 800, it keeps going smaller and smaller, but if I drag it longer, it will stop at the point I've set. So the maximum and minimum width and height is like an extra limitation for the percentage, a dynamic height or width. There's no point if you have a fixed height and width and then set a maximum width or height. Sorry for I messed them up. Let's try something else with this maximum and minimum width. Let's set this width of this yellow text box back and give it a sibling, text 2, which is red, and select this row. Remember what we've tried before, there is a horizontal justify, and we can set both a minimum and maximum width for this row. Maybe we should change this to a computer screen so we can see it better. Maybe we should set this to a bit longer to make it prominent. And let's go to preview to see the results. Let's go to inspect. As you can see, as the window size grows larger, the two grows apart. But suddenly at some point, of course, where I set it 1200, the red box stops to wait for the other. Go to inspect, and as I decrease the width of the window, the two moves closer, but as the row reaches the minimum width, you can see that the red stands still. And vice versa, if I increase the width of the window, they grew apart but never exceeds the maximum width. This is also very useful in responsive designs. The last properties for this section are margin and padding. In relative positioning environment, we can't set x and y parameters for the widgets. Instead, we use margins and paddings. A margin is the space around an element's border, while padding is the space between the element's border and the content. For this text box, the content, of course, is the text. Now if I give this text box a height of 80 pixels, and the content starts from the upper left corner, and now if I go give it a top padding, you can see it moves down a bit, and padding left, and now it no longer sticks to the border. And as for margin, it is a space outside the border, and you can give it a left margin to give it a space on the left. Let's move on to the last and a very important part of this video: wrap, prop, and auto. Let's start with the simplest one, auto. Take this yellow text box as an example. If we delete this width and height, you can see it changed to auto. Since we've given it some margins and paddings, the space on its left and on top of it is set, but now its height and width is still variable. When we leave this to blank, the box's size automatically wrap around its content. And if I make it longer and apply, you can see it extend the box's size. Actually, auto is usually used for text boxes. And as for rows and columns, you can see here the properties, the options wrap and prop. Let's go to the slides to see the definitions. So wrap means to set a widget's height or width to the sum of its children's height or width, and prop means to fill the remaining height or width of a parent. And for this side note, if sometime in your future you find the wrap property is not working, you can come back to see this reference. Now I'm going to show you the effect of wrap property. I'm going to tidy this up a bit, make this back to left alignment. And for this text box, I'm going to give it a height of 120. And for this text box, just let it be 10 pixels. And add another text box to this row and give it the largest height, 300. And now if I select this row and choose wrap for its height, you can see it wraps around all its children and adapts to the highest of them. And for prop, let's use this column as an example. It now has a fixed height of 200 pixels, and it has 3 text boxes inside it. Let me give it a larger height. And I'm going to add an additional row inside it. And you can see this gray row here. Now the row's height is at 100 pixels, but when I select prop, and it automatically fills the remaining height of the column, its parent. We can use wrap and prop properties for responsive designs. Maybe you have noticed that on our mobile devices, there's usually a kind of layout that we have a title, for example, on the upper side, and in the middle is our contents, and at the bottom we have a menu or something like that. In this page, I'm going to add a row, a column, and then a row. And I'm going to give it different colors. And this column. Now we are on our iPhone and it has a height of 667. These two rows have 100 pixels each, and let's set this row to 467 pixels. Click Preview. And go to font size here. And you can see that for this generation it seems to fill up the full screen. But if we change to another device, there's still something blank down here. And this is what we can use the prop property to avoid. Go back to the editor and set this column in the middle to prop, and we can preview it again. And now whatever device you're on, the column automatically fills the height in the middle. We can use what we've seen before, the scroll Y property, with this prop property. Add some text to this column. And now we've selected scroll Y and prop. Go to Preview. Now we're using iPhone 12 Pro. The screen is quite long, so it's not gonna scroll. But if we go back to iPhone SE, the column adapts to the smaller screen, and here comes our scroll bar. That is all for today's video, and thank you for watching.